Hi everyone! Our castle's done, so it's time to fill it with stuff. In this episode I'll show you how I decorated the interiors and baileys. There are many similar rooms inside, multiple barracks, storage rooms, etc. So I'm going to show you just a representative examples of each room type. Many clutter objects that I'm using come from various mods. My full mod list is, as always, in the description. First room is the solar. It is located above Great Hall and serves as a living quarters for the lord and his family. In the early castles, Great Hall was sometimes divided and part of it performed this role. Later on, solars were added to give the ruler and his family more privacy. The name itself is probably derived from Latin solus, alone. It was not only a living space, it was also a place where the lord would invite important guests or conduct some other private business, so this room became a status symbol. The wealthier the lord, the more impressive and lavish were the furnishings of the solar. There is a widespread idea that castles had hidden rooms and secret passages. Well, that is actually true. Often they were used as a means of escape or to bring supplies during siege, and sometimes they led to hidden rooms. So I've decided to make a hidden passage in my solar, leading to a secret chamber where I can do all my crafting in peace without running around the bailey all the time. Building a secret room is all about distraction and redirecting attention. Obviously I need to make elevator shaft, but this single column would be pretty noticeable to anyone entering the castle, so I indirectly camouflaged it by unnecessarily complicating the internal geometry of the entrance. The idea is, the more complex the internal layout, the harder it is to judge which walls form the outline of the building and which have internal space behind them. Also, the walls hiding the elevator shaft are no longer a singular feature in an otherwise primitive and empty room, so they do not draw as much attention. In the solar, I'm doing the opposite. The secret passage and the elevator take the corner, so once the walls are placed, the room becomes simple and regular, thus lowering any suspicion. As for the basement, half of it will be taken by the secret chamber. I divided the remaining space to make 2 more rooms. Once they are decorated, they should draw attention away from the wall and the fact that they are way smaller than the outside. Also, since they are located below the main floor, the perception of being underground is amplified, so it is easy to come to the conclusion that the remaining space was unavailable simply due to terrain rising above the floor level. Back in the solar, I'm using different door for the secret entrance because of its color that's similar to the wall. The fireplace is extremely important. Not only it's a mandatory object in the solar, but also fire will draw attention away from the door. This tapestry doesn't have collision detection, which actually makes sense. It's just a piece of cloth, so it should be easy to simply pull it to the side and pass through. The goal I'm trying to achieve here is to make the visible part of the door look like a shadow on the wall. That's why the fireplace is located on the wall opposite to the door, to produce high contrast. The illusion is magnified by the bookcases due to their lighter color, and also they partially hide the elevator frame. Looking at the wall, it is easy to spot the difference between the 2 tapestries. This is easy to fix. A chest or some other piece of clutter or furniture of appropriate size can hide the bottom of the other tapestry, so that the observer won't be able to make a direct comparison between the 2. Then it's just a simple matter of placing the rest of the furniture and clutter, making sure that nothing significant or important is near the hidden door. This corner should look boring, so that it is easier to redirect attention away from it. And here's the finished look. The first room of the basement is a proper location for a kitchen. The other one, a storage room with a couple of beds for servants to sleep on. Realistically, they'd be sleeping on mats on the floor, but I'm not going for a complete historical accuracy here. The Great Hall was the place where whole household would gather for meals and spend their time. Some would also sleep there. The key features of this room are the fireplace and high table at one end, where lord and lady of the castle would sit. Sometimes the floor was raised a bit there too. It was not just a dining room. This is where all manner of day-to-day affairs of the castle took place, so it was always noisy, busy, but also warm place, since not many rooms had their own fireplaces. Let's move on to the lower bailey. The To add some variety and differentiate between upper and lower baileys, I've decided to use wood for all the structures here. As I mentioned in previous parts, building a stone castle was very expensive. On the other hand, wooden constructions, although structurally weaker, were significantly cheaper to build. Since the additional buildings in the lower bailey don't have defensive function, it makes more sense to choose wood for them. Attaching them to the walls breaks the monotony, adds color and interesting shapes. It's also worth remembering that the bailey is not a city, it should stay more or less empty. The most probable point of failure for castle's defenses are the gates, so it should be expected that the enemies will be able to move into the bailey. For that reason, way to the battlement should not be obvious, and the bailey clear of anything that provides cover. These buildings will serve as houses and workshops for castle's artisans. I've decided to place all the crafting stations outside, because the animated thralls placed in them will make a good starting point for populating the area of NPCs. At this point it is important to consider the purpose of your building. If you are making a base for your clan, you probably want to keep the place free of NPCs, as you'll have other players running around. On the other hand, if you are a server admin making a public structure, you might want to create a bunch of proper NPCs with Pippi. The remaining space will be dedicated to storage. After all, the artisans require raw materials. There is still a bit of free space near the gate, but the terrain here is too steep to build. And I already have all the artisans anyway. So, I've decided to make a small enclosure for the livestock. This is of course way too small to serve as a pasture for all those animals, but that is not its function. It's more of a temporary shelter for the siege. In some of the bigger castles, animals were kept permanently to provide meat for the lord's table, but in most cases, the local population seeking shelter inside the castle during war would bring the animals with them. This provided the castle with additional food supplies and at the same time denied this resource to the invading army. During a prolonged siege, hunger was an issue for both sides. Sure, the castle had limited supplies, but on the other hand, the attackers were often in enemy territory, far from their resource base, and their supply lines were open to attacks. All the buildings are finished now, but both baileys still need some details and clutter. All manner of barrels and crates can be used to quickly fill the nooks and crannies, but there is one more very important thing that should be stockpiled inside the castle: firewood. It was used for both cooking food and heating. Good supply of firewood was crucial to surviving harsh winter months, especially in the colder parts of Europe. As for the times of war, consider that actual combat became the #1 cause of death only in 20th century. Before that, weather, disease and infections were responsible for most casualties, and a well-supplied castle offered way better living conditions than the temporary encampment of the besieging army. Hence the importance of stockpiling firewood. As for the remaining rooms, I always consider not the place but the person, as this gives me a lot of ideas for decorations and makes the locations believable. Like I mentioned in my immersive base building guide, it is more about creating a community and decorating locations in accordance with the occupant's position in social hierarchy. Simply put, lords should live in quite different conditions than a common soldier or artisan. If you're building a large castle as a base for your friends or clan, consider letting them decorate parts of it. Give everyone a tower as their own home. Also consider leaving some rooms empty. An impressive fortress which will look great from the outside might end up with dozens of rooms inside. Decorating all of them might take very long time, and then there's the issue of performance impact. So if you're building online, consider only decorating rooms which are important for you gameplay wise. My point is, don't waste hours of your time decorating rooms you'll never visit again when they contribute to your game only by increasing load times and lowering FPS. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing for more Conan Exiles content. Thank you very much for watching. Build great stuff and enjoy the game. Cheers!